I sacrificed everything to buy that house, then she brought her parents and a lawyer to tear it from my hands like it was theirs. I bought that house with my own money, every last dime I'd scraped together over the years, working double shifts, skipping vacations, sleeping on a friend's couch for nearly a year just so I could save enough for the down payment. It wasn't easy, but it was mine. I'd earned it, and when I signed those papers and held those keys in my hand, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, maybe ever: peace, accomplishment, control. It was supposed to be the beginning of everything finally going right for me, but instead it turned out to be the first domino in a line of events that would wreck everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and trust. Her name was Kayla, 28, and I was 30 when we met at a corporate team-building event of all places. She worked in HR for a sister company, and we got paired for some ridiculous trust fall game where I was supposed to catch her. She laughed so hard when I almost dropped her and said I owed her a drink, so I bought her one, then another, and then 6 months later we were inseparable. She moved into my old apartment, said she hated the carpet but loved the view, and I guess that summed up our relationship too. She was never quite satisfied with anything unless it was hers, stamped, signed and claimed, but I was too in love to see it for what it was. I didn't tell her about the house at first, not because I didn't trust her, or at least that's what I told myself, but because it felt sacred, like a part of me I wasn't ready to share yet. But of course she found the paperwork one night while looking for a phone charger, and suddenly she was all over me, excited, thrilled, asking questions about decor and keys and storage space. I should have known then that her interest was too sharp, too precise, like someone planning an investment instead of a future, but I was blind, stupid, maybe desperate to believe that someone actually cared about me for once in my life. I told her she could move in. Of course I did. I even gave her her own key and cleared out the second bedroom so she could turn it into her art studio like she always talked about. She said she'd help with the utilities and groceries and maybe some furniture if I needed it, and at first she kept that promise. We were happy, or at least it looked like we were. Every Instagram post made us look like some aspirational couple. Coffee mugs and kitchen selfies, but underneath it all I was starting to feel it, the shift, the expectation, the pressure. It started when she asked to be added to the Wi-Fi bill, then the electricity, then the internet account. Little things, subtle, but each one made her name show up more and more on paper, like a creeping vine I hadn't noticed until it was already halfway up the walls. And then one evening while I was sorting through some documents, she asked me about the deed, her tone casual but her eyes weren't. She wanted her name on it. She said it was only fair since we were building a life together and she needed to feel secure. I told her gently but firmly that the house was purchased before we even met and that I'd paid for everything myself. It wasn't a joint asset, and I didn't feel comfortable adding her name, not because I didn't love her, but because I needed at least one thing that was truly mine. She didn't say anything at first, just nodded and went quiet, but her silence was louder than any argument we'd ever had. The next morning she was cold, distant, made coffee only for herself and barely said a word before heading out. I figured she just needed time. But by the end of the week she was talking about how partners should trust each other and how relationships weren't supposed to be transactional. I told her I agreed, which is why I was hurt she was making it all about the title on a piece of paper instead of the life we were living, but that only made things worse. 2 weeks later she said she'd spoken to a lawyer, just for advice, she said, just to understand her options. I remember standing there in the kitchen, blender still running, smoothie spilling over the counter while she said those words like they meant nothing, like she hadn't just detonated a bomb in the middle of my home. I turned off the blender, didn't even clean the mess, just stared at her in disbelief while she told me that she didn't want to take anything from me, she just wanted what she deserved. I asked her what she thought she deserved exactly, and she said half. Half of everything. And then she told her parents showed up unannounced the following weekend, smiling too much, acting overly polite like they were walking into a job interview instead of their daughter's boyfriend's house. I didn't even have time to process what was happening before they were sitting at my dining table with coffee in their hands talking about future plans, property rights, and shared responsibilities like it was a negotiation, not a conversation. Her father leaned back in the chair, laced his fingers together and said something about protecting his daughter's interests. Her mother added that it was only fair since Kayla had invested her time, her energy, her life into building this home with me. I looked at Kayla, expecting her to laugh or protest or just say this was a bit much, but she didn't. She sat there with that same cold look she'd worn ever since I'd refused to add her name to the deed. They made it sound so reasonable, so logical, like I was the one being greedy and unfair. They didn't care that I'd bought this house long before Kayla came into my life, that every brick and nail was paid for out of my own savings, that I'd bled for this place in ways they couldn't possibly understand. They said it was about love, about commitment, about shared futures, but all I could hear was entitlement. Like I owed her something just for letting her exist in a space I built from scratch. I didn't respond, not then, just sat there silently while they tried to charm their way through what was essentially an ambush. When they left, Kayla looked at me and said she hoped I'd think about it. I told her I already had, and the answer was still no. She didn't say anything, but the look she gave me was like ice, like I was the villain in her story now, and from that moment forward something in her changed completely. The warmth was gone. The smiles were strained. She barely touched me at night, and the house that once felt like mine started to feel like a war zone. The lawyer she'd just talked to for advice suddenly became a recurring name in her conversations. She said she was learning her rights, understanding her position. I told her there was no position to understand. We weren't married, we had no legal ties, and I wasn't going to pretend we did just to make her feel better about something she hadn't earned. But she said emotional contribution mattered too. That her efforts around the house, her presence, her support, all of it had value and should be recognized. I asked her point blank if she was threatening to take me to court, and she didn't answer. She just walked out of the room and slammed the door behind her. I started to feel unsafe in my own home, not physically but mentally, emotionally, like I was being circled by wolves and didn't even know when they were going to pounce. She began documenting things. I noticed her taking photos of bills, receipts, grocery lists, things I hadn't thought twice about until then. She started asking me to email her instead of leaving post-its on the fridge. She was building a case, slowly, methodically, and I could see it but didn't know how to stop it, because how do you fight someone you used to love, someone who used to whisper dreams into your ears at night and now looks at you like a hostile witness? Then came the formal notice. A letter from her lawyer requesting amicable discussion about co-ownership, citing her contributions, the duration of her residence, her involvement in household decisions, her financial inputs, and her intention to seek legal recourse if I continued to deny her fair equity in the property. I remember holding that envelope in my hand, the edges sharp against my skin, wondering how I got here. How a woman I loved turned into someone who wanted to tear apart everything I'd worked for, and I realized this was never about the house. It was about control, about taking something she didn't help create but now wanted to own. I didn't reply, not immediately. I contacted my own lawyer instead and we went through everything, line by line, every bank transfer, every utility bill, every signed document that proved this house was mine and mine alone. He told me I had nothing to worry about legally, but emotionally, that was another story. I felt betrayed in a way I didn't even know was possible, like I'd been blindfolded and walked willingly into a trap I didn't think she could set. And then she stopped pretending to be the girlfriend I once knew and instead became a stranger living under my roof. No more smiles, no more effort. She cooked only for herself, did her own laundry, closed the door to her studio and locked it. She stopped saying good morning, stopped saying anything at all unless it was through her lawyer, and every step she took inside that house felt like an invasion. Like she was claiming territory inch by inch while I stood in my own kitchen like a guest. I started sleeping on the couch just to avoid her, just to keep the silence from swallowing me whole. The worst part wasn't the letters or the threats or even the legal jargon, it was the way she looked at me, with pity, like I was someone to be defeated, someone whose resistance was a minor obstacle in her inevitable win. I stopped inviting friends over, stopped speaking about it at work. I became this hollow version of myself trapped in a beautiful prison I had built with my own two hands and financed with my own blood. And now I couldn't even walk down the hallway without wondering if she documented my movements for her records. She brought her parents back, again, this time with folders, files, and a mediator they'd hired on their own. They sat me down in my own living room like it was a boardroom and started negotiating with me, talking about her emotional labor, her sacrifices, the time she'd given up to support me. I listened in disbelief as they itemized her affection like it was an invoice. As if love could be monetized and her hugs had hourly rates. they said if I didn't want to add her to the deed, then I should at least offer a buyout for her share of the home's value. I almost laughed, but the sound got caught in my throat. I stood up, walked out, didn't say a word, and drove aimlessly for hours trying to figure out how love could turn so mechanical, so transactional, so heartless. When I got home that night, she'd taken down every photo of us, every picture frame had been emptied, the walls were blank, hollow, like they'd never held memories at all, and on the kitchen counter she'd left a list of shared assets she believed she had partial claim over, things like the television, the couch, the new dishwasher we'd picked out together. I couldn't breathe, it was like being erased in real time. Every trace of our relationship dissected and redefined in terms of possession and rights. I told my lawyer I wanted her gone, legally and permanently. I wanted to evict her, but it wasn't that simple. Since she had established residency and could prove she'd lived there for months, I couldn't just throw her out without legal cause. I had to wait, file the right paperwork, and endure weeks of toxic silence while we played this slow-motion war of attrition where every stare, every slammed cabinet, every passive-aggressive gesture was another cut. One night I overheard her on the phone with someone, maybe her mother, maybe her lawyer, saying she didn't care how long it took, she was going to get her name on that deed even if she had to make my life miserable until I caved, and something inside me broke, not in anger, not in fear, but in exhaustion, pure emotional fatigue. I couldn't do this anymore. I didn't deserve to live like a prisoner in my own house. I didn't deserve to feel hunted by someone who claimed to love me. So I made a decision. I packed a single bag, left a key on the kitchen table, and walked out. I rented a studio apartment across town, sparse and cold, but it felt like sanctuary. She stayed behind, still in that house, still believing she had leverage, but I was done playing by her rules. I took every legal step necessary, every document, every affidavit, every piece of proof that the house was mine and hers was just a temporary presence now overstaying its welcome. She kept sending emails, then texts, then voicemails, none of them warm, all of them laced with entitlement and veiled threats. She said I'd regret giving up my own home, that walking away made me weak, that I was letting a woman take control of everything I'd built, but she didn't understand. I wasn't running from her, I was reclaiming myself. I never looked back, not because I didn't care, but because I'd already spent months being dismantled piece by piece and I wasn't going to let her finish the job. I focused on the paperwork, on the legal process, on cleaning up the mess she left behind in my life. It took weeks, then months, but slowly the house became just a property again, not a battlefield. I stopped thinking of it as home, it was just an asset, and when the court sided with me, when they officially recognized that she had no legal or financial claim to any part of it, I didn't celebrate. I just exhaled for the first time in what felt like forever. She was forced to move out 30 days later, tried to stall, tried to appeal, even tried to claim emotional distress, but the evidence was clear. Her contributions had been voluntary, undocumented, and in no way proportionate to ownership. She had built a case on presence, not participation, and in the end it crumbled. She left quietly, no drama, no goodbye, just a final silence that echoed louder than anything else she'd ever said. I changed the locks the same day I didn't move back, and I sold the house. People asked me why I'd give up such a perfect home, why I'd let go of something I fought so hard to protect, but they didn't get it. They hadn't lived inside those walls when they started to feel like concrete hands around your throat. They hadn't heard the sound of footsteps at midnight and wondered if this was the night another threat would arrive folded in legalese. I didn't sell a house, I exorcised it. With the money, I bought a condo downtown, smaller, higher, cleaner, no memories in the floorboards, no ghosts in the hallways, just peace, quiet, and a door that only opened to people I trusted. I heard from her one last time a few weeks later, a single message that simply read, "Hope you're happy now." I didn't reply, didn't even think of out replying, because I was happy, not euphoric, not gloating, just quietly, deeply, finally at peace. I'd learned that love without respect is poison, that trust isn't something you demand, it's something you earn and protect, and that ownership, in every sense, must be shared by choice, not force. Sometimes the people closest to you will try to take the most from you, not out of need, but out of entitlement, and when they do, you'll be faced with a decision: fight to keep what's yours or surrender to make peace. I chose to fight, not to win, but to reclaim the version of myself that existed before manipulation wore me down. So if you've ever had to choose between your sanity and someone else's expectations, I hope you choose yourself every time, and if this story hit a little too close to home, hit that like button, drop a comment, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales like this one. Because sometimes the biggest betrayal doesn't come with a slap, it comes with a smile and a pen. And a blank space on a deed that should have stayed yours alone.